The area of the sky that we were all focused on was sort of in this like U-shaped dip in the trees. Like there was trees over here and there were trees over here, and there was an open patch of sky, and all the orbs seemed to be centered around that area. They were off in the distance, right? They were just sort of moving across the sky. Sometimes they would get brighter, especially when we would request, can you get brighter? But then this one was something different because it felt close and it felt different. It was up near the trees on one side, and it just was this blinking light that went up in a tight spiral, and it was blinking really pretty quickly. It reminded me of like those little LEDs on kids' shoes when they run and it blinks.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it reminded me of. What's interesting to me is that the color that people saw was not consistent, because I saw red and white blinking lights.
Wow. That is one of my favorite parts of this, because I saw green. Hi everyone, welcome to the Phenomenon Project, where we explore consciousness, contact, and the true nature of our reality. I'm your host, Corey, and if you're enjoying this content, please consider liking, subscribing, and sending it to other crazy people like me. I truly appreciate your love and support so much. So now let's take the human experience and meet it with the unknown with our next guest, who I'm super excited to introduce you guys to. He is a good friend. He is a fellow Monroe Institute Gateway Voyager, and he's a newly published author for his book Strange Light, which I'm excited to get into. Edson Freeman, how are you doing today?
I'm doing so good. Thanks for having me on here.
I'm excited. We have so much stuff to talk about because this book, I was rereading it this week just to refresh my memory, and I forgot how much I connect with like every single person who shares a story in one way or another. So if you wanted to describe for the viewers, what is this book about?
So what I did was I got interested in these unexplained experiences that people have, these outliers, and I wanted to explore all the different facets of it, and what, not just hear sort of campfire stories, but like what effect does it have on the people after these experiences happen? You know, what next? So each chapter is one person's account. I interviewed a number of people about their weird experiences, and then I did work really hard to keep it as faithful as I can to their actual experience. Sometimes they did ask for some details to be anonymized and things, but I tried not to sort of sensationalize or fictionalize any of the details. So you get kind of a pretty raw version of their story, with me acting just as a storyteller, basically.
Mm-hmm. And these are a bunch of stories that they kind of cover every aspect of the phenomenon, where when it comes to NDEs and messages from loved ones from the beyond, as well as UFOs and aliens, precognition, psychic abilities, it covers everything. And I related so much to all of these different people and their experiences, and I found a little bit of myself in like all of their stories, even the ones that were about like gray aliens, which I always think is so interesting reading about that stuff, because I don't have experience with that, but just having this connection to this phenomenon that you don't quite understand. And even these people, when they weren't physically seeing these gray beings, they could sense there are things happening around them. So how did you find these people and these crazy stories? Let's start there.
Kind of any way I could. I started putting word out through various avenues that I had available to me. You know, friends that I knew. Well, anybody really, but I knew certain friends would have a lot of connections because, you know, maybe they're into ghost hunting, or maybe they have had their own experiences and they talk about them with other people, or and then I also went online and reached out to people sometimes, if they were sharing their story, I don't know, on Reddit or TikTok or Instagram or wherever. And I just tried to find any way I could to learn and understand the experience or community, for lack of a better term.
Hmm. And it just covers so many different things. Did this book, where did the inspiration come from? Was it your own personal experiences or just your curiosity with this topic?
It actually didn't come from my own experiences. A lot of people always assume that I came into this having had some experiences, and only when I looked back on some things did I really kind of realize that maybe I had had some experiences that were just I took them for granted, I guess. But I basically I got interested in sort of the UFO topic, maybe probably around the time that the 2017 article came out, and then the David Grush testimony came out, and those things, and it kind of was like, oh, I guess I better take this seriously a little bit if these people are talking about it. And then I saw an episode of I can't think of the name of the show, but it was about children who remembered past life details, and they were like verifiable details, and it was just sort of all these little things chipping away at my belief system or my assumptions about how things work. And I got really bored really quickly with the UFO topic, in the sense of, you know, looking at videos and everybody arguing about whether it's AI or whether it's, Venus or whatever. I felt like that was just an endless circle of going nowhere. So, what really was interesting to me was the experiences, the consciousness side of it, and these one-on-one interactions, or sometimes multiple people together. I think Chris Bledsoe's story obviously was really compelling, and then another person who wrote a book, whose name is Robin Lasseter, wrote a book called Earth: A Love Story, and she actually was the one who kind of challenged me to write this book, because I had reached out to her and said, I really enjoyed your book. I like the fact that you just said, this is what happened. I don't care if you believe it or not, and just gave the raw truth. And I said, I wish there were more stories like this. And she kind of was like, well, go make it happen then. So and she mentored me a little bit, connected me with some people who could help me, sort of connect the dots and find the people. And next thing I knew, I had a book written. So
Yeah, I really love this book a lot. So you didn't even necessarily have your own experiences, you said, before you started this?
not really, no. I had some really strong synchronicities that I kind of blew off because it didn't fit my mindset at the
Mhm.
time. But otherwise, I had I didn't have a lot of experiences. But I got really intrigued by people who had, because when you talk to somebody that's had one of these experiences, you know that they're not. You can tell the difference when somebody's making up a ghost story for scaring their kids around the fire, versus someone
Yeah.
who had like a thing happen that changed maybe the trajectory of their life.
Yeah, and that's such a normal human thing to do, is to talk yourself back from an experience. Like you just said, that you've had experiences, especially with like synchronicities or just weird things that happen around you, that human part of you just talks you back from it. I mean, I've had a couple of like close encounter type experiences that, for so long I found myself like talking myself back from that, because there's something about, I don't know if it's like self-preservation, that human part of you that's like, I don't even want to go near this stuff. But yeah, it's a
Yeah, I think there's a.
it's
I was gonna say I think there's a cultural aspect to it too. If you're from certain other countries, you might not bat an eye at a past life memory or a reincarnation story or something, and maybe in another part of the world, the idea that there are these star beings, or whatever different names they might have, you don't think twice about it. But we have a lot of like stigma around these topics. But everybody that I talked to, almost across the board, had that self doubt sometimes, where it's like, this sounds crazy. I don't know if I've ever told anybody about this because it sounds too out there. But here's what happened, and you know, you do have to build a little trust with people to get to that part of the story, because if it gets too weird, people really kind of back down, and are like, I'm not ready to I'm not ready to put
Yeah.
myself out there like that. So I guess I can act as a little bit of a buffer to that.
Yeah, it's definitely tough putting yourself out there and trying to share your story and even articulate it well enough, because when you go through an experience, I have experiences where it is so crazy, especially with signs and synchronicities, like true things that I feel like are actually physically manifesting around me sometimes, where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, did that really just physically happen? Because it's tied to something I was just saying 2 seconds ago. It kind of seems like the other side or the phenomenon or whatever, it is, we don't really know. It's connecting with you and communicating so directly that you're like, okay, I feel like I'm in the matrix right now. I feel like I'm in
Right.
a simulation. And you can explain these things to people, and it's so hard to truly articulate it from an emotional sense as well. Like, I've told my friends some things and they've been like, oh, I struggle to find the significance in like what you're telling me, like what's the big deal? And it's easy from like my perspective because I experienced it, and it's so hard to try to help people feel like what you felt and to articulate it right. So I think that also plays into like, was this actually a significant experience? And you're ping-ponging back and forth so much in your own head.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's like, if you get out an old photo album with like pictures from when you were younger or something, and you're looking at them, and there's so much meaning in those photos, but maybe your friend who you've only known for a year or so, none of these people or places mean anything to them, and so they don't have that same connection, right? It's like to you, there's so much encapsulated in that photograph, and to them, it's like strangers, and maybe they recognize you sort of as a kid, but they don't have all those ties to it.
Yeah, that's such a great way to put it. It reminded me of this one time I was with an ex of mine. This isn't even related to the phenomenon, but I was with an ex and he was introducing me to like some lifelong friend, and they spent the whole time hours just reminiscing, and I was the person on the outside that was like, not, I don't want to be rude or anything, but I'm just not connecting to this
Right,
because
right,
they're
yeah.
they're having their own little thing that they've lived and experienced, and I'm on the outside just like, where are the snacks? Because
Right.
I'm hungry.
That is an
S-
important question. Where are the snacks?
yes. That's what keeps me around most of the time. But so you said that the UFO, sort of the UFO phenomenon, quickly you lost interest with, because of just the nature of the community, if you even want to call it that. Most of the time, it is very volatile, and it is often coming from, the call is coming from inside the house. It's mostly people in the UFO community that are attacking each other, which is very frustrating,
Yeah.
because I think there's just so many aspects to it. I relate a lot to the spiritual side of it, but I believe that people are having real experiences with maybe like biological type beings, right? Greys or Nordics or those bug type aliens, the mantises. I think that there's truth to that, but
Hmm.
everybody's attacking each other all the time. It definitely pushes people away from the topic. But were there any aspects of these stories, other parts of the phenomenon that really resonated with you a lot?
Um, I think what I found really fascinating was sometimes like the worldview that maybe somebody gets from their NDE or from their UFO encounter. What intrigued me was that they weren't like mutually exclusive. Like what one person learned through this experience and what another person learned through their completely different experience, have a lot of interesting sort of parallels. And um, as far as relating to the stories directly, I think I didn't have as strong of a situation as this person did, but chapter 3 of the book is called the person's name is Devin, and he's actually a neighbor of mine, who I met while working on this book, and he had a really tragic situation where his adult son died in a work accident, and he felt like he was having some really strong synchronicities and things falling into place and a lot of help, I guess. And I'm not doing it justice by sort of glossing over the details, but when I lost my mom in 2016, that was around the time when I had some help. You know, some things happened that made me go, huh. Especially looking back when my mind was a little more open to these unconventional ways of viewing the world. I was like, you know, that's a pretty big coincidence. That doesn't just happen, you know. So I think that's probably the one that was sort of closest to my experience. But there, like you said, there's a lot of little. Even though I don't have a lot of um, sort of anomalous experiences, I could still relate to a lot of the people and their stories.
Hmm. When you mentioned Devin, I got like full body chills because I was just thinking, because I just reread the book this week and
Yeah,
thinking Devin's son was Gabe. Is that right? Am I remembering that
that's
right?
his. Hold on, I think his yeah Gabe, and then the grandson is Isaiah.
Yes.
Yeah,
And yeah, that's an incredible story of your loved one coming through and showing you that they're with you through physical sensations that Devin was having, but also through dreams, right? Because Devin was worried about, am I going to be able to take care of my grandchild now that my own son is gone? And then Gabe visited their sibling off in a different state and told them, you need to take care of my kid. And so that sibling woke up and was like, okay, I need to take my nephew in and raise my nephew now. And it's just like you said, so many things fell into place and things came in the mail at the exact right time and
right.
that shouldn't even have made it there because it was addressed somewhere else. And it just really, and I'm sure through the most unimaginable loss that Devin was going through, their child was still coming through from the other side to help Devin through these tough times.
Right, and Devin was pretty much a hardcore skeptic prior to this. You know, it
Wow.
changed his whole view of how the world works. You know, so yeah, um, that was a really I don't know if bittersweet is the right word, but it was a very touching story, very tragic but very touching story about how this yeah this whole thing came together in the way that it was
Yeah.
supposed to, I guess.
These are the kinds of stories that really give me hope that there is stuff going on the other side, which I know there is. But there's that human part of me that's always like, oh,
Right.
you never know. But I do believe, and I had my own experience recently. I lost a loved one, and I had this crazy experience where I was with some of the Omis, some friends, and I was talking about this person, and I mentioned their name, which was a very unique name. It wasn't common. And like an hour later, we were walking into a cafe and we sat down on this couch, and I sat down next to like this little side table. And one of the Omis pointed out that, oh, a customer must have left a credit card like next to you before they left the cafe. So I pick up the credit card. I was going to bring it up front, and I looked, and it was the exact name of the person that I was just talking about, which I thought was so crazy. And even they were like, oh my God, that's wild, spelled the same and everything. And come to find out, the night before, this person had passed away, and I just hadn't found out yet. So I
Mhm.
felt in that moment, I thought it was just a crazy synchronicity of, oh, I'm talking about this person, and now I'm finding a credit card with their name on it. What a fun synchronicity. It wasn't until after the fact that I'm like, oh no, they were with me in that moment, and I had no idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Synchronicities are one of the most interesting aspects of this to me because it it's like how did the universe or whatever orchestrate these things to fall into place just this way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking like, okay, one of two things happened. There the universe or God or whatever actually physically manifested this credit card here, or there's someone walking around with the same name, and that they were kind of controlled to be like, I think I'm going to stop in this cafe today. I think I'm going to sit right here. And then they left so all of these synchronicities still one way or the other is still pretty profound to me.
Yeah, I had an interesting experience where somebody suggested to ask for signs, not signs of something to do with the decision, but just sort of like show me that this is real, right? And so I was like, I knew there was one day where I knew I was going to be driving around all over town running errands for almost the whole day. And I thought, okay, what's something that would grab my attention while I'm driving? And I said, how about a pink car? Just give me a pink car. It doesn't mean anything. It's just sort of, it would be weird to see one. And I went through most of the day. I didn't see anything. And what I've learned is whoever is sort of behind this for me has a sense of humor. At least that's my theory, because I pulled up to the end of a like an off ramp from the highway, and there's a stoplight, and just straight ahead of me is this Jeep up at a dealership, and it's up on like a ramp thing to highlight that particular Jeep, and I was like, is that pink or is that like purple? What? And so then I drove around to the lot and drove up to it, and I'm like, I still don't know if that would be considered pink. And is a Jeep really a car? Or is that a truck? Like, does this count? Just playing this game with myself. And so finally I was like, I looked up the color, the name of the color, and it was like, I don't remember, Mojave Pink or Malibu Pink or something. So it had pink in the name, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to give them a pass, but they had to make that sort of plausible deniability for me personally. Yeah, yeah.
That is too funny. Yeah, it's so important to pay attention to these things around you. And the more that you do pay attention, the more you notice these crazy things happening. There was this one story, I think it's Jasmine's story, maybe
Mm-hmm.
chapter two, and she just had like story after story about all of these crazy, even like precognition stuff that was coming through,
Yeah.
and connections to the other side, or I mean, I think she was even seeing things happening before they were happening. And there's a crazy story she shared about, I think she had a dream or a vision of these people in a planter's pot. This is very obviously a very sad story, but she like drew it also, a pot, like a planter pot with a person inside, and then come to find out that there was actually somebody nearby who was like a killer, and that's how they were disposing of the people that they were killing, which is, that has got to be so difficult to live with that kind of information coming in too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it was basically a serial killer who was also a landscaper, and that was his way of hiding the bodies, right? And she didn't know anything about this until she saw it on the news, and she was like, "What am I supposed to do with that?" Like, there was nothing. I wouldn't have known like what it meant until after the fact, anyway. And she said, "I guess it just is sort of confirmation of the things that I see." It wasn't the first or the last time that happened, but it wasn't actionable, and so she had a little bit of kind of frustration around like, why are you doing this to me,
Yeah.
but it was sort of setting her up for later, I think.
Yeah, and definitely getting her attention on it as well, because sometimes they'll get your attention in crazy ways that you're like, okay, I'm listening, but like, why is this happening? And you figure out the why later on. And
Yeah.
I've also found that as I'm reading this book, like the more you think you understand about this phenomenon, the more questions that you actually have, and like the less you know, because
Oh,
you're
for
like,
sure. Yeah.
how is this all connected? This is crazy, because there are people in your book that have a near-death experience, and then they start seeing UFOs, I believe, or they have
Hmm.
like precognition and psychic experiences, ghostly experiences, and then they still somehow see UFOs. And so it's like the more you dive into this, the more questions you have, and the less you truly understand, I think.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I learned through the process to always, as I was interviewing somebody about their experience, I would always then toward the end be like, okay, what about UFOs? What about Bigfoot or cryptids? Like, is there anything else? And they'd be like, no, well, actually, yeah, there was this one time. Like, they didn't even think about it, Were there any weird lights? Yeah, there were these weird, yeah. So it's like even the people that experience these things don't always connect the dots, and so there's no hope for the rest of us to try and figure this out.
No. And I think for so long, especially with the UFOs, that people just assume that they're little green men or something like that when you see a UFO in the sky. I remember the apart from experiencing the orbs for the first time with Chris Bledsoe, I have one experience in my life where I saw something in the sky. And I was 12 years old, and I was with my dad and another family member that was also an adult. So I was the only child, but I remember this so clearly. And we were in Georgia and we were fishing, and there was like no light pollution. It was so beautiful outside at night. And all of a sudden, one of us just looked up and we saw these white lights above us that were just doing all of these crazy maneuvers. And the three of us are looking up and wondering, like, what the hell is that? It wasn't making any noises. It was doing crazy maneuvers that we understood aircraft couldn't do. I mean, I worked on aircraft for 4 years as an adult, and my husband still works on aircraft, and unless it's some type of futuristic technology, like regular aircraft don't make crazy maneuvers like this.
Right.
And I remember this one particular moment where it seemed to me like it turned its headlights on and faced us. Like it was a white light, and then it just got bigger and brighter and literally beamed down and then zoomed off, and then they were gone. And they witnessed it as adults, and we all three of us agreed, okay, that must be aliens, and just moved on with it. But now, as an adult and exploring the orbs and the spiritual phenomenon, I think that it could have been the orbs for me. Like, so it's really hard. You think you understand something, and then many years go by, and maybe you get a different viewpoint of it, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've definitely experienced that kind of
So,
thing.
So there are so many different stories I feel like I could tap into this book, but honestly, people just need to pick it up themselves and read it. And I know that people will connect with it in so many ways. And like I said, was it Sean's story? Sean's was a really great story because he was a near-death experiencer, right?
Right, right.
And then he started having very strange experiences after that. And at the very end of his chapter, I related in so much to something he said. He said that he no longer referred to all of this as the universe, that now he felt comfortable finally using the word God. And even just that one little takeaway for me personally in Sean's story, like I related to that so much because there were points in my life where I was atheist, but I still found myself saying, oh, well, the universe this and the universe that. And, I just could not bring myself to say God. But now, after opening myself up to this stuff, now obviously that's the word I prefer to use. But
Yeah, yeah. And I know I talked to a couple people that would use that word in some contexts, but then because it carries so much baggage for some people, they would phrase it differently for other people. But yeah, I mean, it feels like pick a religion, pick a culture, pick a historical myths and things like that. They're all sort of circling around the same concepts.
right. And I think people should definitely use whatever term they're most comfortable with, and that if they're meant to be led down a certain path, then that's what's going to happen for them. And I don't think you should push
Yeah,
anything. I think that you should go beyond your comfort zone sometimes, but definitely only do it in a way that you feel is enriching for you. And, I've found throughout this whole experience that where I am right now, I mean, 3 years ago, I would not have recognized myself. So just like naturally let
yeah,
yourself follow whatever path this phenomenon is guiding you down because it'll end up in some cool places.
for
That's
sure. Yeah, yeah,
and one of the cool places that both of our paths brought us to, do you like my segue there, was to the
yes,
Monroe Institute. And back in May, we went to the Gateway Voyage program at the Monroe Institute in Virginia. And this was for a very special program that was centered around the Bledsoe. So anybody who knew about Chris Bledsoe and was into the orbs and really just his message of love and unity and connecting with God and the Holy Mother, you could have the opportunity to go to this Gateway Voyage. So I really want to talk to you about your perspective and how that was for you. So how about let's start in a nutshell. Can you share what your experience was like there? And then we'll dive into more specifics.
yeah. It's I would say anybody who is interested and has the opportunity and the means to go, it would be, I couldn't recommend it more highly. The thing that's nice about the Monroe Institute is you can forget about outside responsibilities completely while you're there. You don't have to think about meals. You don't have to think about schedules. You don't have to think about anything other than the program. And it's such a beautiful campus, and it's such a well put together program. Um, you just sort of can I don't want to say sleepwalk through it, but you can just float along and experience it. And yeah, some of the experiences were pretty interesting. I know there were some people in our group that had some really out of this world things happen. I didn't have any huge experiences myself with the meditation, but I had some cool things happen and some cool connections were made. What I did have a cool experience with was when we were out skywatching, though, but we can get to that in a little bit.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. That'll be a good one to talk about. So when you talked about it feels like you're almost like sleepwalking through it, I totally get that. You feel like you're in a dream state. And I don't know if that has to do with I clicked out a lot. So I don't know if it has to do with clicking out. Did you have any experience with that?
Oh man, by the end of the week, I was having to put on the wireless headphones and stay standing up because otherwise I would be gone. I wouldn't remember anything.
Isn't that so crazy? Because I know that I wasn't sleeping when this would happen, and especially when we did the the dolphin energy meditation. I remember Robert Monroe talking about dolphins in the beginning, and then I don't remember anything until at the very, or maybe he didn't even, no, he wasn't talking about dolphins. It was talking about an energy rod in the beginning, and you were supposed to do
Right.
something with the energy rod. And then I don't remember anything in the middle. And then at the very end, you hear Robert Monroe talking you back into your physical body. And I'm like, when did we even talk about dolphins? Like, where were the
Right.
dolphins in all of this? But I know that I
Yeah.
wasn't sleeping. It's so bizarre, that sensation. So you had experience with that and you had to do it standing up. That's so funny.
Yeah. 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 I would, you know, you'd be here listening to Robert Monroe's voice telling you what was next, and then there'd be some pause. And next thing you know, he's, ending the meditation, and you're like, wait, I missed it. Where did it go?
I know. And it's such a bummer too, because you're like, I really wanted to focus during that one, but the way they described it was that you are reaching a really deep state of brainwave activity, and that is when the most healing occurs, if I remember correctly. And I was like, thank God, because at least something's getting done behind the scenes here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I didn't have any out of body experiences. I did have some really cool experiences where I know I wasn't out of body, but it felt like there was a movie playing in my head that I was participating in, but in a lot of ways I wasn't navigating it at all. Like this was during Focus 15, the space of no time. And do you remember anything from that meditation? Did you have any profound?
I remember I remember liking Focus 15 a lot. Um, and it I don't remember the specific meditation for that one, but I do remember because you do 10 and then you do 12 and then you do 15, and 15 I think was my favorite one.
That was my favorite one too. And I ended up connecting with my child self, and it turned into this long journey of like healing myself. And also it was like I was going back in time and then bringing my past self to the present, and then we traveled to the future together. And
Oh, that's so cool.
it was all about healing. And I actually had to sit out the next meditation. I just sat down by the crystal, but I remember coming out of our debrief after Focus 15 and seeing Marco. And Marco was obviously really shooken up too. And he also found his child self. And then I think I heard that there were other people that found their child selves. And I think that is the focus level. And I could be wrong, but I think it was the focus level where Emily Bledsoe, her amazing stories that you can find on the Bledsoe Said So podcast, where she talked about healing all of these past versions of herself. And I think that there's just so much potential with Focus 15 when it comes to helping yourself in the past, the present, and the future, and how it all blends together is freaking wild.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that the meditation that sort of stuck with me the most was early on. Um, it was the one where you were supposed to get three messages, but they put a twist on it and said you're going to get the messages for someone else, and you're not going to know who. None of us are going to know who until after the fact. And that one was really cool because, well, I don't know if I want to give out people's names, but the person whose messages I received was very touched by what I had to say, and they were very specific. They were oddly specific to her journey and her experience. And then the person who had my messages also, it was the same thing. It was like so specific and so personal. It was like, how does this happen when you didn't know it was me and I didn't know it was going to be me? And like it blew my mind how you can take this headphones, put them on, go into a quiet room, listen to this meditation, and come out with messages for someone else without even knowing who it was going to be.
Yeah. So for the viewers, the exercise was you're going to go into this meditation and you are going to be receiving messages, but you don't know who they're going to be, and we don't know who they're going to be for. And while we were in the meditation, one of the instructors, he was in his own meditative state. And he was basically, he had like two lists, and it was like all of our names split up. And he was drawing lines to whose message was for who. And so we didn't know until after the meditation, after we wrote down notes and received the messages, then we found out who the messages were for. And unfortunately, I think that when I was receiving my messages, I saw the person's face that I felt that they were for. And then come to find out, there was like one or two other people that were like, no, I think my message is for that person too. So this one person ended up getting like two or three messages from multiple people. And then I felt really bad for the person who I got paired with. And I just read the messages to this person anyway. And he was like, no, I don't think that resonates at all. And I was like, I'm sorry. You know, sometimes it just happens like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, that was a really fun one. It's some type of weird quantum entanglement when stuff like that happens because you don't even know who you're receiving the messages for. And actually Kirby was the one to deliver messages to me. And what's funny is that she described seeing me in this particular scenery, and it was like a creek of water, and there were a couple of big rocks in the middle, and everything she described was like this very, very special and sacred place from my childhood. And it's from my small town where I grew up. And every time I go home to Massachusetts, I go to this spot and just spend a few minutes there because it's there's ever since I was a kid, it just felt magical. You know when you go to a place and like
right.
Roberts Mountain where the Monroe Institute is, and you just feel the energy shift. So she described this place to me, and I was like, wow, that sounds exactly like this place. And then in Focus 15, that's where me and my younger version of myself went for a portion of the meditation. We were sitting on the rock in the middle of the creek, which is where I spent a lot of my childhood. So that was a really cool connection as well. A lot of cool stuff happens at the Monroe
Yeah, yeah,
Institute.
yeah. And even like trivial stuff like knowing somehow what we were going to have for the next meal. Like somebody would always get a message of we're having pork
Yeah.
chops tonight or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, there was somebody who said that they thought for dinner we were going to have steak and cake, and I'm pretty sure that's what we had for dinner.
Yeah, yeah.
I had such a great time even aside from the meditations. I think our group was so special. We did so many fun activities, like using the dowsing rods too,
Mhm.
which is not anything that I had ever done before, but I was getting such clear messages from the dowsing rods there, and then now that I've come home, I've done it a bunch of times and I haven't got diddly squat. So I don't know if it's just the energy that's there. I really think it is, honestly. I think when you're in the right place with the right energy, you can do anything.
Yeah, that place is something special. Like that whole area.
Yeah, it's really
I don't know what
magical.
it is, but yeah.
Were there any other things that you loved about the Monroe Institute, or any other exercises or any special moments that really resonated with you?
The skywatching was very cool, um, because it was, um, we were all standing out there just chatting and going, "Oh, was that something? No, that's just a plane. Oh, was that something?" For like, I don't know, an hour or two, we were all just sort of talking and relaxing and getting to know each other and comparing our meditation experiences and things. And then I think it was you kind of pointed us to a certain area of the sky, and it just started, you know, so many um, orbs, and you had the psionics camera so that you could sort of give us a heads up because you could see it before it was visible to the naked eye.
Yeah.
And people who hadn't, I had done a skywatch with the Bledsoes once before, so I kind of knew what to look for and what to expect. And there were some people there who had never experienced it, and that was cool to see. And when they started responding, can you make a triangle? And here comes a triangle across the sky, and that whole thing was I don't know, something special. And then of course there was that spiral one. That's the one
I
that
was I
really
was
got
gonna
me.
bring that up too. Yeah. Before we get into the Swirly Boy, the green spiraling one, um, yeah, I had we almost packed up for the night too, because it was getting late. It was
Right.
just at like 11 o'clock. And Shane said when he checked his watch, we had seen the first orb at like 11:11, which of course is like, oh, synchronistic to him.
Mm-hmm.
He has a podcast, 1111 HQ, if anybody wants to check it out on YouTube. But I just kept looking in that same spot. And of course, I'm looking around just seeing if I see anything else, but something was drawing me to that spot. And I was so close to packing it up. I think everybody else was too. Some people had already gone to bed.
Right.
And I was standing next to Mark, who had never seen an orb. Actually, Mark was the person that I thought my messages were for him, because I saw Mark's face in that meditation we talked about. And one of my messages to him was, I said, "You haven't seen an orb yet, have you?" And he said, "No." And I'm like, "I think that you're going to be seeing one in the next couple of days. You're going to see your first orb." And so I was really excited to skywatch, and Mark was standing next to me, and that's when I saw this really bright light appear behind the trees. And I looked at my camera, and then it disappeared, and I was like, "This is it." I just felt that electricity come through me, and I was like, "It's on like Donkey Kong. Let's go, people. Let's get it together." And the energy was so goofy too, which I think is so important for people who want to skywatch, is just don't take it too seriously. Have fun. We were quoting SpongeBob and just yelling
Right.
funny stuff to each other and being goofy. And it's that childlike energy that really
Yeah. Yeah.
draws them in
Definitely.
and they respond to. And it was really remarkable seeing Gabe. Um, and he also has an Instagram, and I'm trying to remember what his Instagram is, but it's we used to call his orbs glorbs or something like that. Anyway, Gabe, he started getting into filming orbs after this because he was so inspired. And he was one of the people that kept asking for triangles. And that was really remarkable. When you see this inspiration light up in someone, like it makes it all worth it. When you see these people all around you just lighting up and being inspired and wanting to take this experience home with them. And the Swirly Boy orb was something that I had never seen before. So I would love for you to share your perspective of what happened with that.
Yeah. It was so the area of the sky that we were all focused on was sort of in this like U-shaped dip in the trees. Like there was trees over here and there were trees over here, and there was an open patch of sky, and all the orbs seemed to be centered around that area. And they were off in the distance, right? They were just sort of moving across the sky. Sometimes they would get brighter, especially when we would request, "Can you get brighter?" But then this one was something different because it felt close and it felt different. It was up near the trees on one side, and it just was this blinking light that went up in a tight spiral, and it was blinking really pretty quickly. It reminded me of like a like those little LEDs on kids' shoes when they run and it blinks.
Yeah.
That's kind
Yeah.
of what it reminded me of. Um, and what's interesting to me is that the color that people saw was not consistent because I saw red and white blinking lights.
Wow. That
And
is my one of my favorite parts of this because I saw green, which is so
yeah,
different.
and somebody else saw like a teal color and somebody saw white and yeah. And that to me makes it really interesting because we all saw it. Like we all gasped. And I think you got it on camera, right? Like it happened and it wasn't, that's not what satellites do. That's not what planes do. That's not what fireflies do.
No.
It was something else. And we all kind of were like, whoa, that was so cool. And I think somebody saw it even in the woods or something after that. Um,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Somebody
then we didn't,
it shot over like I don't know 100 yards away super fast and I didn't see it but there was a couple people that did and they were like it's over there now it's over there and apparently it went up into the tree.
yeah, and hadn't one of the instructors told us that there were sort of fairy lights and stuff that they would see too around
Yeah.
that area. So,
Hmm.
but I think what was kind of interesting to me was that we all saw this, and then some people, like you said, had called it a night. It was late. They were tired. They went to bed. They missed this experience. So we're telling them about this at the breakfast table the next morning, and that's when we figured out, I think, that we had seen different colors. Like it wasn't like we had this conversation at that night. It was just like, wait a minute, what color did you say it was? So yeah, that was really interesting to me that we all experienced something, but we didn't experience it exactly the same.
Yeah.
And
That really
that
tracks for the UFO phenomenon too,
right,
because there will be people standing right next to each other that will see something in one shape, and the person right next to them will see a totally different shape, or sometimes they won't see anything at all. And
yeah, or like sometimes like you'll hear stories about, you know, honey, come look at this. No, I don't really want to. For no reason. Like something in their head was like, it's not time for you to see this or whatever.
that was one of the stories in your book was that there was and I can't remember who it was. It might have been
Oh, that,
Sean.
yeah, it might have been Sean. Yeah,
And
yeah.
they were in the car. It was him and his children and his wife, and his daughter pointed out a UFO out the car window in the shape of a football. And he said it was bright white and it looked like there was like an oil slick of like kind of these rainbow colors over it. But that his wife said after the fact she didn't see it because she felt there was an external force not even allowing her to look at it, which, makes you wonder people have to be in the right mindset, or maybe people would just be too afraid and they would know, and this phenomenon knows that it would trigger something in them. Maybe they would be too afraid and it would have a negative effect on them.
Yeah, yeah, and another sort of example of that is, I was saying earlier that my experience with synchronicities and things always has that element of deniability. Like I can talk myself out of it pretty easily, but
Hmm.
also I can't. And somebody, when I was talking about this, said maybe because you're working on this book, you are supposed to remain more skeptical or
That's a
more
great
removed.
perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great perspective. And I think that you need to have a healthy level of skepticism with anything. And that doesn't mean that you don't believe a person's story. It just means you need to have that perspective to ask the right questions from all different angles to really try to understand like how anomalous something is. And I think that from my perspective, what we call the swirly boy, it was only about maybe 50 yards away and it came out from behind a tree and it was so fast. And from my perspective, being about 50 yards away and seeing how big it was probably close to the size of like a basketball from my perspective. And when I talked to other people that were in our group, some of them said that it seemed even smaller or that it maybe seemed a little closer. And like we talked about different colors. And I think that that was just so special. And it got all of us like jumping up and down like little kids. And that was definitely one of my favorite moments of like my whole life, not even just a
Yeah.
week.
I was gonna say that's probably the most amazing thing that I've seen in the sky at any point. I don't know if that
Yeah.
counts as the sky, but um, I can't compare it to anything else.
No, and like I said, there's so many times where, I try to look at my own videos from the perspective of other people and other skeptics. And I look at my videos and I'm like, I can understand why they would be skeptical, why that looks like a satellite. And every once in a blue moon, we will experience something that goes beyond our understanding where we're like, okay, we can't deny that. Like for me, I have one that I caught on camera um, when I was solo camping, and this was like the 1 year anniversary of like the first time I went solo camping to Skywatch. So I kept calling it my Orbiversary, and when I was like talking to the orbs, and there was this one moment where there was like maybe four orbs going across the sky, and I said happy Orbiversary, and then one of them just started blink immediately to what I said, just started blinking and then just disappeared. I'm like, okay, throughout the whole night or the whole weekend I've been sky watching, the one moment where I finally am like happy Orbiversary, then one of them blinks. Like it's those moments that really take you outside of the experience, and you're like, okay, I can't just throw that away, throw the baby out with the bathwater on that one. So
Yeah,
these
yeah,
experiences are cool.
yeah. I don't know if you can, but it would be cool to add that Swirly Boy to this.
Oh, I will. I definitely
Yeah,
will because people need to see it. And it wasn't a firefly because it was too cold for fireflies. It was like the first few days of May. And so the weather was a little chilly, a little rainy most of the week. It was beautiful though.
yeah.
But there were no fireflies at all. We
Well,
didn't
and I
see a
mean,
single other firefly.
I grew up with fireflies, and I've never seen one act like that. Anyway, that's not. They don't blink that fast. They don't move in spirals, and I
No,
do
they
think it's
don't blink
interesting.
that fast.
I do think it's interesting that the current Monroe logo is a spiral. You know,
Oh
so
my gosh, I didn't even think about that. That is so true. We're making the connections now.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
crazy. But you're right. The fireflies don't blink that fast. They can move pretty fast. I have seen them like zoom, not usually in a spiral, and they don't blink that fast. They'll just like illuminate for a few seconds and then, dim down and then illuminate for a few more seconds. And it was a remarkable experience. And I think that if there's any takeaway for the audience, it's that if you put in a little bit of effort and as far as meditation and just, exploring this crazy reality around us that we just don't understand, and also surrounding yourself with really cool people and just good energy, that you can start to really tap into all these little things that just normal people, I think, are inherently able to do, but they just don't know how to do it.
yeah. I really came away with from both the book writing and the Monroe Institute with my takeaways were to be more open and more humble about what we understand. Every generation, probably for thousands of years, has thought at some point we've got almost everything figured out. Like we've got this down. There's just a few little nooks and crannies that we have to still work out, but I think in reality we have no idea. Like this universe is so complex and magical and hard to understand for our little puny human brains. I think that if we can just be open and be not so stuck on thinking we know everything or even close to everything. That's my takeaway.
That's so true. And for people who are like, well, science says this, science is a bunch of BS because science is constantly changing. Let's be honest. When
I
I
mean, that's
was when I was in community college, I was like 19, and I remember taking I don't know if it was an anthropology class, but I remember they tried to tell me back then, and I believed them because what do I know? That like the Homo sapiens were only like 180,000 years old or something like that, and now they're saying that it is way older than that, that it could be over 1 million years old, and it's like, okay, so, and we know more about space than we do our own oceans. What's going on with the
yeah,
oceans? There's just so many things that we don't
yeah,
know
and
about.
there's been points where in history where if you had said that the Earth goes around the sun rather than the other way around, you would have been mocked or laughed at or imprisoned or killed or whatever. Like science is interesting, but and it's put some really fascinating technology into our lives and things, but it's also it can be prone to biases just like everything else. I mean, scientists are humans, and if something doesn't fit expectations, that little outlier point might just be like, oh, that must have been an error. That doesn't fit. Let's throw that one away. Whereas my approach is like, let's look at those outliers. I want to know what's going on out here on the edges.
Yeah, that's where all the fun is.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And sometimes you do find out that it was nothing. Sometimes you're like, oh, that was just a
Yeah.
plane. And other times you're like, I still don't know. And that's where the magic happens, is just that wonder of like, you know, what if on all of these
Yeah.
different experiences.
Yeah. And it is important to have a healthy level of skepticism because not everything in the sky is a UFO or anomalous. So use your tools, use your personal discernment as well, and just try to enter this field, just like with, the psychic field as well, or if you're ghost hunting. It's like it's the same for everything. Just go into it with the right tools to be able to differentiate what is anomalous from what is normal. And what I want to recommend to everybody, especially the skeptics, is why don't you just go out and explore it yourself? Why are you sitting around and criticizing the people who are exploring it? Just go do it yourself. You can do it.
Yeah, yeah. There's this big push in online in the UFO community for, there's a group of people that wants government disclosure, right? And I'm like, we kind of already have that, but regardless of that, somehow people who have experienced these things themselves, they don't need that. They already had their disclosure, their personal disclosure that this is a real thing. And so to have the government or whoever say this is real doesn't really mean anything to them because they already knew that. So
Hmm.
you just gotta nobody has all the answers, and if they tell you they have it all figured out, that makes me way more skeptical.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, I feel the more I dive into this stuff, the more questions that I have. And I also think
Yeah,
it's not to bring up Disclosure Day, the movie, because I am going to watch it, of course. But
yeah, same.
I think a lot of people are really putting a ton of stock into this as far as like, oh, they're actually going to disclose stuff with this movie. But I'm not so sure about that. And I don't think you need a movie or the government, like you said, to tell you what's going on. I think that the tools are right there at your fingertips. You just got to reach out and grab them.
Yeah, yeah. Go out and try and seek out these experiences. And like me, sometimes you will find out that there's weird things that happen, and you don't know what they are. But
Yeah. And as somebody who has interviewed a lot of different people, you've had a lot of what I'm assuming are really cool conversations with people about these experiences. And there's just such a vast array of experiences within this phenomenon. And there might be people out there who want to believe, or who are maybe a little skeptic, or are even a little afraid. And having had all these conversations, do you have just any advice for them other than to read the book? Because there's a lot of really cool stories in there that are going to open your eyes. But yeah, do you have any words of advice for the skeptics or non-believers?
so I think just hear people out that have these experiences. Listen to them with an open mind and an open heart, and just take them at their word, even if you don't believe. Like you sometimes get this mentality of like, I believe they think it's real, or I believe that they believe this happened, or whatever. But just set all that aside and just connect with somebody and listen to their story and understand what they're saying about not only what happened, but what effect did that have on them. Like I said at the beginning, that's what draws me into this is how does this it seems to be there are people that have had negative experiences, but it seems to be even those people eventually come to find that it pushed them in a good direction. I don't know that that's universal, but in general, exploring this topic tends to lead people to good places. And so just hear them out, just listen, and just let go of the little voice in your head, at least for a little while, that's
Yeah.
shouting that this is all fake.
Yeah. And I always make the joke of like, nobody even has to know that you're entertaining this stuff. Just do it secretly in the
Right,
privacy of
right.
your own home. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to make this public. Just do it on your own. And something that I wanted to talk about earlier, but I didn't get around to it, you kind of just touched on it a little bit. But, what I've noticed through my own experiences, talking to experiencers, and even the stories in your book, that people who start experiencing these phenomenons is they're going through a tough time a lot of times.
Mm,
They experience loss, somebody close to them who's passed, or their business is failing or they go bankrupt, their marriage is failing. And that's an important aspect of it too, because I imagine when people are feeling down and out and going through a tough time, they might start thinking they're crazy with a lot of this stuff that goes on.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, trauma definitely seems to draw this in more, whatever it is. It does seem like there's a some kind of through line with traumatic experiences opening people up somehow. And also sometimes, like if you look at the Bledsoe story, the trauma comes from sharing the story and how
Yeah.
people reacted to it. That also sometimes comes into it. But yeah, does the experience or the phenomenon cause trauma? I don't think so. I think it just is what it is, and it. I don't know what the connection is to trauma other than maybe that produces something in our brains or in our souls or something that draws this phenomenon to you.
Yeah, it could open you up in ways that you didn't understand. Um, I know going through my own trauma recently, losing I'm telling you, like, I started this podcast because I went through something and I lost somebody close to me. And then when I thought, like, okay, I'm starting to feel better now, it was like, boom, I got hit again with something. And you
Mm.
just like, you keep getting hit and you keep getting knocked down in life sometimes. And something that I've experienced is I feel like I've gone through an ego death the last few months. I feel like when you go through that type of trauma, it just cracks you open in a way that like you've just never experienced before. And I think when things like that happen, weird things happen around you. I haven't gone out to Skywatch at all in the last couple months because first of all, it's cold as hell outside. It is so cold. I don't want to be out there. But I've been working on myself indoors away from the night sky, and that's fine, and I talk to the orbs and I pray every day, but I will say I had a pretty remarkable experience. It was my first one that I've had in months since going through this, and it was New Year's morning. So what's today? Today's the second. So it was literally yesterday morning. And my husband had overnight duty. So I was home alone with the dogs, and my dog woke up at 5:45 in the morning and just threw up everywhere. And I was like, oh my
Mm.
God, this dog. So I had to wake up and I had to clean it up. And I went into the kitchen and I'm throwing everything away. And I look out the kitchen window and it's pitch black outside, and I see this glowing white light that looks like it's in my backyard or maybe just beyond it into the next property. And I've spent a lot of time outside sky watching in my backyard. And I know where all these lights are coming from. There are some people that leave their porch light on, some people that don't. And I see someone's porch light on that I recognized, and then it was nearby that, and I see this light, and it's getting bigger and it's getting bigger, and I'm thinking in my head, is that getting bigger? And right when I thought that, it shrunk back down. And I was like, whoa. And now, I'm rubbing my eyes because I just abruptly woke up to clean
Right.
up this mess and I feel sort of out of it. And and then it got bigger and bigger. I'm like, oh my God, it's getting bigger again. Like this, what is causing that? And then it got smaller again. And it felt like it was beaming right at me. Like it felt like I was directly connected with whatever was going on here. And it got bigger one last time. And then it literally just blipped out into nothing. And it was the
Wow.
craziest thing because the way that the roads are set up could not have been headlights. Obviously, it didn't even have the characteristics of headlights on a car. So I knew it wasn't a car. And just the way it was behaving was crazy. And I felt like maybe that's a good sign for the new year and for things to come,
Yeah, yeah,
especially after going through a tough time. So if you're going through a tough time, try to lean into these things, is my recommendation, the best you can.
yeah. I would agree with that.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. So we'll see how 2026 goes.
Yeah, yeah.
Hopefully, it'll be a year of amazing experiences and new knowledge. And we talked about a lot of really cool stuff. Do you have any final words for us?
I would just say I've got an audiobook version of this coming out. As soon as my narrator is done, we want to get it right. And I'm working on a book too. So if you have any stories that you want to talk to me about, reach out to me.
Awesome. And how can they do that? How can they reach out to you?
Oh, good point. You can find me on, you can find
They
me
could just
on,
send it psychically.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's perfect. If they do that, then I'll have a real story to talk about. Um,
Yeah.
no, so probably the central point of contact would be the website, strangelightbook.com. But you can find me on all the socials either under Edson Freeman or Edson Freeman author. Um, I don't stay active on all of them, but and I tend to clone my content across multiple platforms, but um,
Same.
yeah, you can find me out there if you need to, and if you want to share a story. And not every story that I hear from people is going into the book. If you just want to tell me your story, just sort of as background information, that's cool too. But yeah, that's about all I got to say for that topic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking about all of the amazing stories in your book. If anybody has any cool stories they want to share, reach out to Edson. And I appreciate you so much. Thanks for coming on the show, Edson.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been great.
Awesome. Bye, everybody. We'll see you in the next one.